My name is Sam. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss. And Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency, and we offer a variety of free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more to help you succeed throughout your career. We will be taking questions at the end of today's webinar. Feel free to leave them in the Q&A, and you can leave questions as yourself or anonymously, so don't be afraid to ask whatever comes to mind. We're also recording today's session, and we will be sending it out in a follow-up email later today, as well as some more information about Johnson & Johnson. So you'll have all of that in your inbox later if you miss anything, or you want to watch it back, or just learn more. Today, I'm joined by 4 outstanding leaders from Johnson & Johnson. We have Jenelle Sweet, Director, Consumer Account Management for Janssen Supply Chain. She manages the relationship between JSC and the consumer and consumer medical device sectors within J&J. And she's been with the company for 14 years with cross-functional experiences in both medical device and pharma in the US, Mexico, and Puerto Rico. Next is Vicky Sanchez, who is currently a Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at Janssen Supply Chain in J&J. She has over 25 years of supply chain experience in the chemical, consumer, and pharmaceutical industries, and develops future leaders through mentoring and her participation in the J&J Hispanic Organization for Leadership and Achievement, as well as shares her passion for STEM through her contributions to J&J's Women in STEM 2D youth outreach programs. Did I mention that these 4 women are absolutely incredible? But I'm not done yet. I'm also joined by Nima Subramanian, who is currently the General Manager of Janssen Biotech Malvern Manufacturing Site, where she has the responsibility of providing leadership and strategic direction to the site operations. She's been with J&J since 2008 and has diverse supply chain experience across many of J&J's businesses. And last but certainly not least, we have Shalot Palmer, who is Head of Consumer Health Quality Strategic Initiatives. She leads a team responsible for the strategic quality initiatives, delivering value for the consumer health transformation, and has over 20 years of cross-functional industry experience in quality and supply chain across multiple sectors of J&J medical device and consumer, as well as international experience while living overseas in Switzerland. So today's webinar is a first of its kind. We wanted to highlight the various challenges women of color working in STEM experience, and our speakers are bringing us into real conversations they've had in the workplace. The goal here is that we can all learn how to best navigate sensitive discussions with empathy and understand to help us be better allies and colleagues. So thank you in advance to all of our speakers for being here today. And Jenelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, hello to the 83 attendees currently on the phone and on the Zoom. We are so happy to see you. And I'm going to be your Oprah Winfrey or Jada Pinkett Smith for the day. If you are not familiar with the Red Table Talk from Jada, that's what we're modeling this after. And really, when they asked me, you know, do you have any women of color that you would recommend to be on this panel? I said, well, let me just get some of my friends together and we'll mimic the conversations that we have all the time. And so what we'll aim to do for you today is provide you a little bit of our experiences, good, bad, ugly. We'll talk about tools that we've utilized to overcome some of the things that are just systemic in nature in terms of keeping women and especially women of color back. And we'll have as real a conversation as we possibly can. So take everything we say in the spirit of what it is, and forgive us if we say something, but this is going to be, you know, Real Talk 101 today, November 10th. All right, so we'll start off, and I just wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to sort of introduce themselves personally as a holistic woman. And I'll start. And no, look, we're over 100 now, which makes me super happy. But I'll start. So my name is Jenelle Sweet. I have 2 kids, one that's 15, a 15-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. So my life is not just J&J and not just working. And I'm trying to raise them as beautiful Black children in this crazy world. I, come from New Orleans, Louisiana, with a very African-American upbringing, and I try to keep that sense, that core sense of who I am in everything that I do. And I have a dog named Bam, and my passions at work are diversity and bringing up representation and inclusion, as well as making products that save lives. And let's go to Vicky next in terms of your intro.
Thanks so much, Jenelle. You always inspire me when I hear your background and everything you do, as well as being an amazing J&Jer. For me, I guess I'll take lead and do similar to you and do my outside first. So I'm the oldest of six, first to have gone to college from Hispanic, Heinz 57 even there. My mom is Mexican, my dad is Puerto Rican and Panamanian. I married as blonde and blue-eyed as you can get. So I'm raising a lovely 10-year-old bicultural son. And in the midst of all of that, have through COVID now have my mother, 87-year-old Latina strong woman in my household as well. So for those of you who have that multi-generation experience in any shape, way, or form, COVID is definitely, from a positive lens, has allowed me to show my son some of, and my mother to show my son some of that Latino food, not so much, she's not a cook, but definitely the other elements of it. My passion is very much, as you heard in my intro, very much about STEM. My background is electrical engineering, been in supply chain my whole career in a few different industries. And so now with the years of experience, really called to action when, about a few years back, 30 years of data did not show any difference in women in STEM in very critical places. And so that's where I'm giving it back, is want to see more of that youth, of those future leaders, find STEM as exciting as I do. And then in my day job at J&J, very much in project leadership, process excellence, in and out of manufacturing, in and out of product life cycle is my passion there. So thank you, Jenelle, for allowing me to introduce myself. And I'm sure there'll be more there later. But, I love puzzles. If anybody loves puzzles.
Gracias, Vicky.
Yeah.
So next, Shay.
So first thing I need to do is get off of mute. Everyone's getting used to their new worlds of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and WebEx, you name it. There's a new technology for all of us to use. So I'll say, I guess for the team, I would be your Southern Belle. I'm from Houston, Texas. So hopefully we have some Texas or, Central United States, Southern United States, whatever we want to call it. I have two wonderful children, Keith and Kennedy Palmer. They are 7 and 8-year-olds, and they keep me busy. So on the weekends, I'm your typical soccer mom, football, cheer, gymnastics mom, and I love every moment of it. But one of the things that I think that's very important, or that comes out of it, is that during the weekend, I can let my guard down and have time with my children to enjoy those things that we all cherish and is so important to us, family and just being a well-rounded person, but also being able to show my kids through the weekdays that mom's a hardworking professional woman, and that there truly aren't any limits. There shouldn't be any limits, but what can we do to help make sure there aren't those limits, for the future generation? So similar to Vicky, I was the first to go to college in my family. I came out with a degree in electrical engineering. So for all my Sparkies out there, or electrical engineers as we're called, hello to you, and look forward to hearing some great questions today. And then last but not least, when I am in the office, I get the pleasure of working in the consumer health quality organization where we lead the strategic initiatives. So as we're transforming the consumer organization, what are those strategic initiatives that we need to work on globally to really move the needle forward?
Thanks, Shay. We're glad you're there. So, and Nima, last but not least.
So Nima Subramanian, I grew up in India and I emigrated to the US more than 20 years ago now to pursue my education. And I think like Vicky and Shalot, Shayla, I'm also an engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer by background, so no sparks here, just heavy machinery, I guess. I'm a mother of 2 kids, 2 boys. My older son is 17 years old and a senior in high school, and my younger one is almost 6 and a kindergartner. So I'm going through the K through 12 experience all at once during this COVID crisis. So it's been wonderful. And I think as some of my fellow friends and panelists here mentioned, this entire time, the last 9 months has given me a chance to really showcase to my children working from home how a woman can balance both a demanding career involving STEM and all that comes with it, along with being a mother and being there while supporting them with their education. So, these women whom I'm looking at in the screen, who are my fellow friends and panelists, I've leaned on them many times, and I'm really happy that I got a chance today to share our collective experiences and thoughts with a wonderful group like yourself. So really happy to be here. And in my day job, I'm currently the general manager of a biologics manufacturing facility. And throughout my career, I've had the wonderful opportunity of working with different technologies. I've had the pleasure right now of working with some of the smallest man-made things. In my previous life, I worked at Boeing. So some of the biggest man-made things are really spanning microns to several meters, I guess. So thank you and happy to be here.
Thanks, Nima. I think several of us have the joy and challenge of raising teens or preteens, so maybe we can get into that at some point too. But thanks y'all for introducing yourselves. Now let's get into the fun conversation that we're going to have for the next 50 minutes. So, I'm not going to start light. So let's start with this year. I mean, 2020, we've seen the memes. It's the best and the worst of everything that's going on. But, earlier this year, we definitely had several things happen to people of color disproportionately. We had the disproportionate impact of COVID on our communities and really impacting us in a big way. We've seen it with our family members. I had my grandparents both fall ill with COVID and many other friends and families. We had the horrendous murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, countless others. And really this awakening, right, of our world and of America and of our corporation to the reality of systemic racism. Hopefully not temporary, but certainly everyone is a little bit more woke this year. So in terms of just a high level, how has 2020 made you feel? What are you feeling along the way this year? Maybe we'll start with Vicky.
There's so many emotions that have come through this year. I think it starts with, I'll start with the light ones and move into the heavier ones, but something like you mentioned earlier, 25, 30 years out in the industry. I've traveled my whole time, right? So 9 months to not be traveling 5, 10, 25% has been a change. One, because and most of this travel has been with J&J, and I'm so grateful for that because it opened my eyes. You talk about being awake, and the travels through these last almost 3 decades of my career exposed me to almost every continent except 1 or 2 in the globe. It showed me all shapes and shades of color that you see when it comes to racial and social justice or injustice out there. And sometimes you shake it off. Sometimes you step up to the plate and call it what it is. And sometimes you realize wow, it's the green is grass. The grass has developed a little bit greener on the other side. I'll get it out right. And there. But yeah, I mean, particularly to 2020, it started with this, whoa, really, I'm going to stay home and wow, so there from a frustrating, how do I balance this all and work from home? I think J&J from the beginning was pretty out there and just immediately giving us clear direction and leadership from Alex Gorski all the way down to organization on both crisis management, which is part of our J&J, but even in how we're going to be parents and work employees to J&J. It wasn't either or, it's how do we do this together? And even to this day, we get emails on the whole gamut, how to do the work, how to do my personal life, how to do the community outreach. So it's been amazing there, even to the point where, like you said, being awake, right? In the summer when all the George Floyd is the one, it was the spark or the explosion, if you want to call it. And Alex, I told these ladies earlier, it's like Alex sent us an email like on Sunday, Saturday, you know, for our leader, I mean, he goes, get ready. We're having this conversation. My personal first reaction is like, whoa, we're really going to talk about this at work in this environment and stuff. Because I don't know about many of you, but at least being born and raised in the US, you just don't bring politics into certain realms of the conversation. You don't bring certain topics that was raised. You know, you don't talk about your color. You don't talk about you talk about the facts, the more politically correct, right? So that's the growth So it was very powerful to get that email from Alex, and then powerful enough in the days, and hours to come from J&J giving us tools to be able to have those conversations. We leveraged our Credo to do that. So, so scared, excited, nervous, anxious, hopeful, sometimes fatigue, because there, I think the whole rainbow of expressions have come in 2020, but hopeful, I'd say, is the prevailing one, as my colleagues know, and hopefully you'll get to hear. I'm pretty much about positivity. So no matter what life throws my way or my friend's way, it's all about let's take it, but let's step up and take the high road, right? As a famous person says all the time, that I think highly of.
Vicky, it's so funny you say that, because, from my perspective, you're right. You were taught that, hey, there's certain things we just don't talk about at work. There's certain feelings we don't share at work. And I would say for 2020, this was probably the first year when, like you said, Alex Gorski, our leader of the Johnson & Johnson organization, came out and said, we have to have the tough conversation. So one, it opened up the door for all of our leaders to acknowledge that as a leader, we lead through tough times. We also lead through great times. And in those tough times, that's when we really have the opportunity to step up and show and shine as a leader. And he opened the door for us to do that. They weren't easy conversations. They weren't always comfortable conversations. But what he did is allow his leadership to then have discussions with each of their staffs and teams. And so this was, for me, a year, the first time that we really talked about some conversations that I never thought I would have had in Johnson & Johnson, with me leading it to my staff and organization, or being part of it with some of my senior leaders. But I want to say, I think it was eye-opening. It was needed. I think it was appreciated. And in some areas, it made some of us comfortable, but uncomfortable and comfortable, but it gave us the opportunity to really think and look from a different perspective, regardless of if you were going through that experience and you've lived it for the last X amount of years, or you're friends with someone who's gone through that experience and you've never talked about that conversation. This opened the door to have those true, honest, candid conversations. And I'm just very appreciative of it. But like you said, it was a whirlwind of 2020. I never thought I would have had those kind of emotions and shared those kind of discussions at a corporate, environment, professional environment.
And Shalot and Vicky, you're bringing such a good point, right? I've seen such acts of courage from people like Alex, definitely top down, but also at the wage population. I mean, I lead a manufacturing site, and I kind of feel the pulse of the group, and you can see and attest to the fact that each and every single day I witness that acts of courage, people reaching out, people putting themselves in these uncomfortable positions because they want to either learn more or educate more. And through these 9 months of the COVID crisis, it's definitely the conversations that were sparked and or exploded since George Floyd, but also even the pandemic support for the different parts of our community and how those individuals and leaders are stepping up. And I have I had a chance to attend one of the talks, I think both of you mentioned, where a senior leader had kicked off this event within our consumer community. And I sat in there, and I have to say, I walked out of there feeling, and I grew up in India, as I mentioned, pretty much a homogenous community from a racial standpoint. I moved here and I've lived here for most of my adult life in the US. And through J&J, had the opportunity to work with such diverse group of individuals that my experience has shaped my thinking. And then I saw how that leader brought all of that together and allowed us to really express our thoughts, learn, move, and really not just move, but create a movement. And I think that's really where I would say the power of J&J and the power of the environment that's been created within our organization is really wonderful.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but I lead a global team or have dotted lines to the global team, and that conversation happened worldwide, right? And the honesty and you had people from different countries, like you mentioned, homogeneous countries, Nima, going, not sure if there's racism or social injustice here, and peers going and saying, no, wait, it looks different, it may be different, it may sound different, but there's equality, right? Equality is the base, and there's always inequities, no matter where you are, and the call to action, right? The running joke was peel the Band-Aid off, right? No promos or anything, but it was just it allowed for that conversation, not just to happen, like you said, wage to leaders to global conversations, which were eye-opening.
Yeah, I want to speak to this a little bit, and I'm seeing also chats, and I hopefully this will help respond to some of the questions in the chat. For me, when the murder occurred, I will be 100% honest with you. I saw it on TV and I said, damn, they got another one. They got another one of us. And, I send my husband and my 15-year-old son out every day. And frankly, we fear for their lives every day. I mean, certainly I think about Trayvon Martin, and if my son goes out and walks down the street in the dark, walking my dog, and he's got a hoodie on, is he coming back to me? My husband's been pulled over, I don't even know how many times, by the police here in New Jersey. Is he coming back to me each time? And George Floyd did not go back to his family. And I do think it was positive that our CEO sent out a message. However, he did send out 2 messages. And what I like about what he did was the first message, for me, it fell completely flat. And it felt too canned and too polished. And then it was clear that somebody did give him some feedback, one of his Black colleagues, and he came back with a more strong messaging. But I did feel like it took our leaders too much time to actually figure out how to respond. And part of that, I think, was because of a lack of representation at those top levels, and especially at those next level down leadership. And so for me, it gave me a sense of, frankly, I don't care about the consequences. I'm speaking up. And the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So, I felt in those first 2 weeks, I found some leaders that, and I see in the chat a question about how do I get my leaders engaged? I personally went and found people I could depend on as allies to express my thoughts to, get it off my chest. One of those leaders that I really admire, she wrote me an email and she said, thanks for taking the time to breathe with me, because I feel the same way. And I think it took a really strong nudge to some senior leaders to start to actually make some positive movement. Now, we have to keep nudging. We have to keep moving senior leaders in a particular direction, because if the wheel stops squeaking, the grease will no longer come. And we have to keep fighting for representation and fighting for diverse slates and fighting for diverse hiring panels, bringing in education, history, and awareness. There's no excuse anymore for anyone to say they did not know. That should no longer be the excuse. And I do think that's where J&J, not all areas of J&J, by the way, but some areas are taking a very direct approach in bringing in education, awareness, and educating the larger portion of the population of history, what it means to call something systemic, so that we can all get the help that we need and get the support that we need to continue to move forward as holistic women. So, I think we're moving in the right direction, but I felt like it took too long early on. And it took a lot of nudging and a lot of grassroots movement to get it going. And I do feel like some of our organization is feeling like it is slowing down, and we need to keep the pedal to the metal to really make our world a better place for the next generation.
Jenelle, one of the things that you brought up, and I want to maybe expand on that, because I think it takes an entire community to be able to make that change. And for that word that you use, allies and allyship, is so important, because it's not that a person is singularly fighting their fight by being the squeaky wheel. And I think that there's somebody in the chat who mentioned that, sometimes squeaky wheel gets reprimanded for being the squeaky wheel. Mm-hmm. So how do we build a community around people who need that support? And I can tell you that I would not have reached where I have if I did not have the support system around me of people who did not look like me, who did not speak like me, or who did not have my exact same background. And these were the people who have helped prop me to the place where I am, because they believed that it was a cause worth fighting for. And I think this is where I think our allyship building, and it started in one of our organizations, is now really gaining a lot of momentum. It started off with a few people calling the building allies to the Black community, but now we have more and more people joining, to a point where it's reached this wonderful tipping point, and it's reaching to other organizations, and we are engaged in conversations how we can start taking these conversations to larger organizations such as supply chain, which pretty much houses, in terms of just the number of people, the most number of people. So how can we get to everyone to kind of enlist in this wonderful cause? So I just wanted to add to what you just said.
Takes the masses.
It takes the masses.
It takes a culture. It's a cultural change. It's a cultural shift, and you can't shift culture with one person. You got to shift it with masses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that the term of allies. It's a new phrase. I think we've called it different things, but I think ally is so powerful, and heard a few people be there because it's an element of also, some of us are in roles where we can not only just it's be support, be that courage, be that lens to those squeaky wheels, if that's the term that's used in there, because sometimes it's sharing your story, showing visibility of what you're doing, how you're doing it. Like Jenelle, Jenelle was one of the ones who I reached out to, if I can share a little bit, Jenelle, our story is, I just literally went out there and said, okay, teach me. I think those were like, educate me, teach me, tell me what I don't know, kind of deal. And asked her, I said, hopefully this is, I'm going to just be out there and be bold and share it. And so, and then others reached out to me in different ways. And so sometimes it's just, like you said, Nima, it's being your leadership style, no matter who it is, no matter what race, what color, what gender, really speaks thousands and thousands of words that you can't, and it provides that courage, that open window, that open door to allow people to show their passion, show what they're feeling, and then for us to listen and understand what's that passion or spark. As Jenelle just shared, right? For her, it's the talent. It's around the talent. Almost everything I heard is, let's bring the talent, let's bring the representation.
Numbers matter. Numbers matter. So
numbers matter.
Yes.
Yes. And at the end of the day, there have been many movements, initiatives that have all started because of that one squeaky wheel, that person or that group that had the courage to stand up when it wasn't always that easy to speak up and get the ball rolling, get the conversation started. And then once you realize how many other people have similar stories, similar instances, you get that momentum and that motivation to help and support. So you're right. It has nothing to do with color or gender. The support comes from everywhere. And we've seen that through a lot of the movements that have even taken place this year. But it was those couple of, like you said, catalysts or squeaky wheels that started to say, this is not right. This is not acceptable. We need to do more. We need to do better. And look, how it moves and progresses from there.
Yeah. And I don't know, Shay, if you
A
want
little bit of good trouble, right, Shay?
the good trouble. But the good, Shay may want to share. I mean, I got to know Shay a little bit through our employee resource groups, right? And our We STEM 2D effort, and what little bit of good trouble we're trying to spark there, right? So I don't know if you'd like to share that journey on us.
So I want to,
go ahead.
Vicky, I want to make sure we get to some of the questions in the chat.
Oh yeah,
they're awesome. So the first question I want to make sure we get to, and it's personal. Talking about how do I engage at my local site to move the needle on this, and I wonder if any of us have any advice for. It's an anonymous attendee, but anonymous, you're welcome to reach out to me afterwards. But any advice that you have, maybe Nima, this might be good for you since you run a site, to help understand how can this person get some traction, get some support to really bring awareness and positive momentum within the site in terms of women of color, people of color.
Yeah, and I think this is a wonderful question, right? Because a lot of times, and I think we started off by talking about how in many cases the tone gets set from the top. But if you are someone who is at a level that you don't feel as comfortable being empowered to start those conversations, it can be exceptionally daunting and exceptionally hard. And I think this is where I think what Jenelle and Shay were mentioning, that the concept of that good trouble. I think right now we are in that precipice of social change. There's a lot happening around us. And the way that, at least at my site, we started the conversations were really enlisting a couple of our colleagues who are African-American female, into a conversation with our HR colleagues, because a lot of times they want to make sure that it's a safe space, and the fact that they feel safe sharing those opinions, and then starting off with a very small group. So there are, they don't feel that there will be repercussions. As I mentioned, somebody else had pointed that out, that sometimes that could happen. And then once you start getting that word out, I think you start enlisting a lot more people. Mm-hmm. It is also important to reach to the senior leaders. So if you're able to find a mentor or someone who is has the same passions and the same intentions as you. I think, Jenelle, you mentioned somebody you very much rely on. I have had some people in my career whom I think have the same intentions. They may, as I said again, they may not look like me. They may not really necessarily be exactly like me, but they are people who are well-meaning, and to reach out to them to gain their support so they can create those micro spaces where people can have safe conversations. And how I view it is, and we're all women in STEM, so I'm going to give you a geeky example. If you ever broke a vial of mercury on the floor, they're small balls that form, but then if you start collecting them, they become a large enough pool. And that's really how I view it. If you have these small groups, at some point in time, it's going to have enough momentum that it really takes flight. And that's how it started. When I mentioned those acts of courage earlier, it was those people at my site and the wage population who had reached out to me and who had reached out to our HR partner to say, could we have those safe space conversations? Could we make this a routine? And then we took it to their bosses, who are the supervisors, and the supervisors started to have those conversations. Then it went to the operations managers, and so on and so forth, to a point where it's really become pretty much a standing conversation and feeling of a safe space, regardless of whom you're talking to. So I think there is a lot that can be done from bottom up. It doesn't always need to be top down. But when you start that, if you have an ally in the senior leadership, it definitely helps.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And never give up your power. You have power. You are an individual. Every person has some power. How do you use it is the question. And that's where the coaching and the mentoring can help to frame up your proposal to help make it stick. One thing that most people, regardless of your political background or your cultural background, you like to win. A lot of people like to win. And if you frame up your diversity strategy in terms of winning, you'll win. So, and that's some of what we've had to do is frame it up in terms of winning in the marketplace, in terms of winning powerful talent. Think about what leaders talk about when they talk about diversity. Yeah, it's a cultural, it's a personal imperative, but it's a winning strategy. And sometimes if you talk about it in those terms, a mentor can help you really frame that up.
Yeah. And Jenelle, when you say that, right, a lot of times as a business, we are trying to reach to our customer base, and our customer base has evolved and changed continuously. And we talk globally, not just in the US. I think, Jenelle, you and I had a conversation with a group of people earlier about how in Europe, you're starting to see the same demographic shift that you have seen in the US, and globally that change is happening. And if we want to attract those customers, we need to have representation of a reflection of our customer base in our employee base. So from that standpoint, I think it does make good business sense to be having that mindset of diversity and inclusion. So it's a great point you make there, Jenelle. Yeah.
There's so much data and reports that back that up. You just got to Google it. Honestly, it's all there. So I'm going to move to another question. We're getting so many fantastic questions. So forget all my questions. We're just going to answer the ones from the panel. So Farheen is asking, so it seems that addressing challenges women of color may face are motivated by leadership. And what if it isn't? How do we deal with microaggressions from colleagues or leaders? And so I don't know if anybody on the panel has a story maybe that you can tell around a microaggression or something that really just didn't sit right with you, and how you either addressed it, or sometimes we don't address it, but then it like nags us for years afterwards. So does anybody have a story they want to tell about that?
I would say for me, it's probably the hair thing, microaggression.
You're beautiful. Okay.
Thank you, but it doesn't always look this way. So I'll be honest that if I come out of the shower, I may have a very different look. But throughout the course of your career and time at J&J, I have worn my hair different. There are curly days, there are straight days, there are different days. There's length, shorter lengths, longer length days, that come into play. And I think initially it started off as, oh, I would just like to touch your hair and see, but it wasn't a, do you mind if I touch it or can I touch it? It was just, oh, this is so interesting and different. And, the words that kind of came out, maybe it was coming from a good place, maybe it wasn't, but it's how it sat with me, to the point of, first off, you didn't ask, you just automatically took it upon yourself to infringe within somebody else's personal space. We don't do that in any other area. Why would we think it's okay to do it in this area? But like I said, the place where it may have been coming from that person could have been from a very, simple or a non-malice place, but it's how it was received by me, and then also the perception that it gave. So, I've heard people in the past, kind of talk about that. So it's how can we educate our partners? The inquisitive side of it is wonderful. I love, ask, let's have the discussion. Why is it different? How is it different? But it needs to be from a place of learning, and it needs to be from a place of genuine, knowledge and wanting to understand in that regard. And I think those are some of the things. That was one microaggression for me. And at the moment, I was just kind of like, yeah, and backed away and didn't make anything more of it, because, hey, we're in a meeting or wherever we were. There's no need to take it to that next level. But looking back on it now, I probably should have used that as a coaching and teachable moment for that person. So, that's one of the things where it's like, hey, it's not what you did, it's how you did. And if you ever were to do something about like that in the future, this is how maybe you should best approach it. And so, shame on me for not taking that moment, but I've learned from that. Since then, I've had that discussion with that person because it truly bothered me long enough to say, I should have handled this a little differently. And obviously, because of it, I feel that that person is in a better place, and they can share with their friends and family and whoever else, that, hey, this is something I learned or something that I saw as no big deal, but how it was impacted or felt by someone else.
That's a really good example. And frankly, my daughter deals with that on a daily. She told me yesterday she wore a ponytail to school, and a kid pulled out her ponytail. And I'm just like, how can this be? But it's, it happens. There's one I want to bring up that I've experienced on multiple occasions, and I'm having a feeling you guys have as well, just to cover the topic of microaggressions. So especially as we talk more blatantly and boldly about diversity, I've had a few white men say to me, boy, the worst thing to be right now is a white man. It's the hardest position to be. And, lately I've gotten a little bit more bold where I'm saying, well, you guys had a lot of years before now, but how do you guys respond? Have you had someone say that to you recently where they think, we're discriminating against white men right now?
Yes, I think we've heard it even prior, right? If you're a woman in an engineering field, that does come up as that reverse discrimination, right? It comes up sometimes in a joke, it comes up sometimes, and I think there's some feeling and truth to that, right? So I think I always try and ask where is it coming from, right? For as many of you who know me, it's I come from a place of learning and inquisitive, so that active listening kicks in almost immediately in any type of microaggression. It didn't come naturally. I mean, I think what Shay said, for many years, it's like, oh, laugh it off kind of stuff. But I think as my experience and as the topics came in, right, as being a part of employee resource groups and having those conversations, realize, and then as my leader role came in, it's like, if I wanted to change, I have to be comfortable with those conversations. So sometimes individuals will engage, and the banter begins. Sometimes they'll be like, and they walk away. So they, just as we would have, all of us have the different rainbow of colors of emotions and reactions to it, our peers who are feeling that, right? But I think it comes from a place of realizing that, I like how you said it, Jenelle, because many a time I go, if you're starting to feel a little bit of that, can you imagine what it's been like for those who have felt it their whole life, who were raised, like I said, who, I mean, I think, I can't remember who it was. It's like, the conversation I had to have with my children at this age, to tell them to be careful. And if a cop stops you, and I'm just sitting here going, whoa, kind of, so it's hard. It's not easy. Some people don't want to hear it, right? Kind of deal. But so
it's a very interesting thing. Janelle, when you mentioned that, right, it ties back two concepts that you brought up. One was around the fact that how do we increase representation so we can have those conversations? Yeah. And the conversation is not about if by giving a woman of color or a man of color a chance, you're taking away from another group of people. The conversation is about how we are increasing the pie, because our business is growing, because we have reach into those diverse communities, perhaps where we didn't have reach. So really, we're expanding the pie so there's more slices for everybody to have. It does not mean by giving one a chance, you're taking away from another. And in fact, to your point, it's really about ensuring that we are bringing in people who can reflect what's out there in our customer base. And when you talk about microaggressions, for me, it's a lot of it is also goes hand in hand with what we call unconscious or conscious bias, right? Being a South Asian woman, the thing that always many South Asian women probably have heard this thrown at them is, are you tough enough? You seem too polite. And things of that nature, right? And many of you know me, I'm a nice person, but that does not preclude me from being tough when tough decisions need to be made. It's kind of the opposite of, I think in the chat, someone had mentioned the stereotype of the angry Black woman. And I think if you're from the Asian side of things, you get into the opposite end of the spectrum where you're almost too docile, that you're not capable of making those tough decisions or tough choices, and you're not the right person for a job because there is this stereotype or a bias that's associated with who you are, and it shuts down the conversation even before it starts, both ends of the spectrum. So I think there was one question, and I don't know about that angry Black woman. I just saw it, and I don't know if that resonates with you, because I see Shay and Jenelle, if that's something that you see, because I see the opposite end of the spectrum all the time being asked of me.
Shay, do you want to bite on that one?
Okay, go ahead, Jenelle, if you want to take it first. I took the microaggression hair one.
Okay.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but
No,
I thought it was a
love
good.
it, Nina.
Yeah, but
Thank
it's a
you.
good
think-
one. Yeah.
Here's the nice thing about me. I think my southernness outweighs the anger piece, because I just don't have a lot of, but I have had friends who have been labeled the angry Black woman or the angry Black man. And it is appalling. It's appalling. And it oftentimes comes from a point of cultural background. I think we as Black people are a little bit more guarded. You have to think about what our culture, what our ancestors have been through. You know, my parents were segregated in the South. I grew up in the South. I grew up in New Orleans, guys. It's still segregated to this day, folks. And that's the kind of backbone and toughness that we've had to build. And I think a lot of times the quote unquote anger is coming from a guarded nature. And that needs to be recognized and put aside so that you can learn who this person is as a person. I can't help if someone makes a snap judgment of me or of my friends that they are angry or a certain way. But if that person has any level of maturity in terms of cross-cultural communications, then they will work hard to chip away at that exterior, which is there for a very clear reason, to find out who is that person, what's in their heart, and how, because a lot of times that person has a lot to bring to the table. So I think the onus of responsibility, in my opinion, is on everyone else to chip away, because that's just a very deep-seated guardedness that our culture tends to have. I don't know, Shay, if I'm speaking out of turn or if you disagree with me, but.
No, you're spot on there. And like I said, I think the only thing is really with the, kind of the angry Black woman tone, it may come across as you're seeing my passion, my frustrations, my concerns, things of all that. But really, like you said, I think in this day and age and time, we need to give each and every one of us the benefit of the doubt that where is this person trying to come from? And Vicky, you mentioned it. I think, Jenelle, you've said it. Nima, we've all mentioned it in various fashions or forms. This is a very uncomfortable space. And so we all need to take some level of ownership to take that step back and say, where is this person coming from on both sides of the spectrum? You know what I mean? Where are we coming from? Is it from a genuine place? And if it's not, then that's a very different conversation, because then you may see the angry Black woman. I'm just joking, but in that regard, just
sometimes you need her. Sometimes you need her.
But give people that benefit of the doubt of, are they coming from a genuine, inquisitive place? And if so, take that moment to teach them and to educate.
There's one thing I want to add to that, Shay. So one thing that bothers the heck out of me, because I get it a lot, is this whole thing about executive presence. And I actually think, and this is Jenelle's opinion, maybe I'll go write a paper on it and publish it in Wikipedia, but I actually think a lot of what shows as a angry Black person, Black woman, Black man, is us attempting to be that executive presence that everyone wants us to have. And my natural personality is friendly, folksy, I smile a lot, blah, blah, blah. But, and that I've been dinged on different assessments for not having that executive presence. And it took actually a woman, she was an HR leader, LGBT woman, actually. I presented in a leadership program that I was supposed to be working on my executive presence. She pulls me and she aside and she says, never say that again. They use that against women. They use that against women of color. And I wonder if, you know, some of the perception of being who, you know, who they think we are is because of we're trying so hard to be someone we're not. And then it comes off in a particular way because it isn't necessarily super authentic.
And
So
I'm glad you brought that up, Janelle, right? Because I think the same foundation that allows us to have these conversations at J&J, right, which is our credo, and which shows, if you look at it when it was first built, was on taking care of our patients, taking care of our community, and then, you know, taking care of our employees got placed in there, and then the stakeholders will come through, right? And so it's been the credo that is the culture, right? It's the culture of our foundation, and it's the values. And to your point, I mean, we just recently had a refresh, I think is what we called it, right? Of what's the words, what the terms, things went in there very much that have allowed us to have these conversations. And I think to your point is to have the courage to say the culture needs to continue to evolve, and that's what it's meant. And it takes the voices of all of us to help understand that the employee, the patient, the consumer, the doctors, the nurses, they all look different. They all are different globally, and we have to bring all those flavors and personalities in. So executive presence, I think, is part of that. I think the verbal cues, the presentation cues. I mean, you brought up the hair, right? I love it. I don't think anybody's seen me and I think about right after my son, my hair went curly. Everybody's like, why did it go curly? The women who are having kids, they knew why it went curly. I meant 30 minutes, 45 minutes more of sleep, right? So those, and all of a sudden, you know, that straight hair is the more executive look. It's the more presence look. Still to this day, get the day I do wear those straight hairs, like, you look awesome, Vicky. And I was like, well, what was wrong yesterday with my curly hair? Still same look, still same. The clothes stayed the same. Everything stayed the same. Yeah, so I think I like how you just called it the way that is. There's some styles, and I'm glad somebody came and told you, you know, and I think you and I've had that conversation. You're like, Vicky, what could I do? I was like, no, just keep being yourself. There's some core facts of how we present with respect, with you know, active listening. But everybody has their style that has to come in. But be aware of it. Like they said, you know, those microaggressions on executive presence are there, and we just have to continue to chip away, and hopefully it continues to evolve. You know, culture doesn't happen overnight, change, but I think the mindset that all the up and down J&J, it's clear that we do need to change, and we need to, like Lima said, unconsciously or consciously start, you know, embrace more of this. And I bring it up because one of the chats was individual saying, hey, you know, me being a white woman, how can I support something, you know, here's an example of some, you know, a way of shouting back out and letting others know, you know, your secrets, your advice, anything you can give, both ways. From it. I'll never forget the Latina call. I mean, born and raised in Miami, very Americanized, if you talk to my Latina colleagues. And I'll never forget the first time I went to Puerto Rico, and they're like, Vicky, it's so nice to see you in color. And I was like, ooh, didn't realize I had, you know, I'd become the blue, you know, I'm still wearing it, the shades of blue. It's like that. But but they gave me the confidence and the strength to put out the hot pink, to put out which I see Nima, and I love that she wore it after that on there. So embrace it.
So I cannot believe this. We only have 5 minutes left. And I don't know, Sam, I think we might have to have a round two. But what we're going to do, I'm texting with Sam from here, Fairygodboss, is we're going to take all of the questions that we have not answered, and we're going to go to our groups page on Fairygodboss's website, and we'll continue the written discussion there. And maybe we will look for a round two to continue this conversation. I guess before we finish, I saw several questions about helping others advance, and I really want to leave this on a positive note. And I was actually thinking, rather than advice, maybe each of us can talk through something we're doing differently to help women of color, people of color advance within our organization. So think about that for a second. And is there anyone who wants to go first?
I can definitely start. One of the things, and I think I can tell you this, growing up in the corporate world, I did not see a lot of women, or even quite frankly, men who looked like me in positions of leadership. Now that I am in a position of leadership, I think I really can make a difference and act as a role model for all those aspiring young career people, so that they get the motivation that they can at least reach what I have, but most hopefully surpass what I have reached. So there can be more of those people who can act as those role models and representatives of the communities that we live in. And I think for me, particularly, apart from definitely being in the ally community for the African ancestry group within J&J, where I'm leading that effort to build that ally community. I'm also a sponsor for SAPNA, which is our internal employee resource group for South Asian professionals to network. And through those two avenues, I really hope to make a difference.
You will. I know you will. So who wants to go next? Shay?
I'll do a quick one. I think for me, I found that being more of an introvert, I think I've come a little bit more out of my comfort zone. Still not an extrovert, but being an introvert, I felt that there were times, in my career where I probably should have reached out to ask someone, would you mentor me, or would you be comfortable with just having a coffee and talk about situations and things of that nature? I've realized that now that I am in, some of those positions of power, and as I've moved up in my career, let me go and help take some of that uncomfortableness, if that's even a word, but off of some of the younger generation. So you'll see me reach out. Hi, how are you? I don't know you, but it's very interesting. I'd love to get to know you. Are you available, maybe to meet for coffee? Hey, I've seen you around. I saw you at a presentation. Would you be interested in maybe sitting down? I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. And by doing that, I think you kind of break some of that, I don't want to call it uncomfortable, but that, that ice or that wall that's there between people that, maybe they aren't very comfortable with reaching out to someone that they don't really know. That was me many years ago. So I purposefully take that upon myself to do. And not to mention being an electrical engineer by degree, each and every opportunity we have to work with Johnson & Johnson, which has a wonderful We STEM program, We STEM 2D, excuse me, let me get my terminology correct here. But, all of these different programs out there, to be a part of it, to give back and to work in those different areas and to support our ERGs, our employee resource groups, whether it's for us, our African Ancestry Leadership Council, or, many others that are out there. There's a lot of other ones that I'm also, part of and support. So, those are the different ways in which I found that I like to help and support, to give back to that next generation.
Fabulous. Thank you, Shay. And Vicky?
It took all my ideas. No, and strongly. I think
I got them all from you, Vicky. Come on.
Yeah, no. But for me, it's very much about paying it forward based on where I'm at in my career. So I'm proud. I was pleased to see the things I had done were continue to be some of the things to do, but to do it strong, more with more power behind it, I would say. So very similar to what Nima and Shay were saying. So when it comes to, I'll work my way backward. When it comes to, more women in STEM, we talked about STEM STEM 2D is a space where we need many people, men and women. And I had a wonderful journey with a lot of mentorship and allies all the way through. So if I can, so share, however I can share that, whether it's for a young 5-year-old and showing them that slime is already their first step to doing a chemistry recipe in our manufacturing site that Nima runs, to women in college who are still very, very, very young, and you see the passion and that the journey they have ahead of them will throw some hurdles, but to say, hey, you will get through them. You have the strength, you have the knowledge, think and make sure you know what your passion is, and don't let anybody but take that away from you. Don't let anybody, and there'll be people around, like Nima said, allies and stuff. So, and then at the end, it's being that advocate, right? We are, as Nima said, we're in leader roles. So showing, you know, my path, which is one of many. Nima's path was very different from my path. That's the beauty of J&J. You end up with many different paths, but making people aware of it. But whoever it is, whether it's men or women of whatever shade or color, just help them to see that part of my success is being an ally. It's accepting all thoughts, accepting all activities to the best for our patients and our employees.
Awesome. And just to end it, I give time, I tell the truth. And, you know, if you want real conversation and real mentoring, come to me. I will never lie to you, and I will tell you the real deal. And I think that's the best thing we can do for our women and our women of color, give them the real talk. And with that being said, amazing conversation. Thanks everybody for joining our girl chat. And we'll continue it on the Fairygodboss page in writing. And then I think we'll talk to our team about maybe doing another one of these, because we certainly didn't get to all the questions.
Yes, thank you. I think I speak on behalf of everybody when I say thank you, Vicky, Nima, Jenelle, and Shalot, for a wonderful conversation, for just having these honest talks. It really brings a lot of different perspectives that are very much needed right now. There's tons of thank yous in the chat. And if we did not get to your question today, please go to the Fairygodboss group for Johnson & Johnson. It's Women in STEM 2D. I'll be sending the link in the follow-up email, which will also include the recording. Post your question there. There's tons of great women ready to weigh in with their own experiences and perspectives. And yes, we'll definitely look to hosting another one of these in the future. Thank you everybody for spending the last hour with us. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, and we'll catch you at the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Sam.